Man, such a powerful story. I want to say real quick, welcome to everybody joining us online. Welcome to everybody at the Speedway campus. Shout out to Elijah if you're at the 11 a.m. this morning. Man, we love you. Thank you for sharing your story. Can we give it up for Elijah one more time at our Speedway campus? Man, that's what generosity is all about. It's about lives being changed for the gospel. And as I heard a little more about Elijah's story, I mean, not only did he encourage his grandparents to take that step of faith and get baptized, but man, he's leading a Bible study at his school with 30 other students showing up weekly as he is pointing the way to Jesus. So awesome, so awesome. Well, hey, if you're joining us for the first time this Sunday, or maybe you've been tracking with us through this series, we are continuing on in our series, Letters from My Future Self. And the whole premise of the series is if we could go back and share some things with a younger, dumber, less intelligent version of ourselves, what would we say? I know looking back in my life, man, there's some things that I would share with myself to encourage myself along the way, to know God more, to trust God more. Week 1, we talked about asking for help, not being afraid to ask for help. Week 2, we were talking about forgiveness, learning to forgive, letting go of the hurts that were done to us in the past. And this Sunday, we're diving into a topic that, man, it relates to all of us and is so important in our journey of faith and walking with Jesus and discipleship. And if you're taking notes, the title for my message today is God is Your Provider. God is your provider. Throughout my life, as I've been leading in churches and walking with Jesus for over 20 years, one of the lessons that I would go back and share with the younger version of myself is, Jonathan, even though you're going to have seasons where you are stressed out about finances, where you wonder if God sees you, knows, or even cares about the circumstance that you're facing right now, hear me when I say this: God is your provider. He's your father. He knows what you need before you ask him. He sees your needs before you even think to ask him. And he has never let you down, and he will never let you down. And friends, we want to operate this way. We want to know that, man, God is not just distant and far away. He is in the details of our lives, and he is actively providing everything that we have right now and will provide for our needs in the future. And so instead of a letter this week, which I've been reading some letters that I would write to a younger version of myself, I want to open with a story this week. And I remember when my kids were a lot younger, maybe 4 and 6 years old, they came to me one summer with a couple requests, and they said, "Dad, we want some toys." I was like, "Okay, fair enough. You know, what do you want?" Sawyer's like, "I want a Millennium Falcon Lego set." Let's go. It's a strong decision, right? My daughter's like, "I want an American Girl doll," but we weren't near birthdays, we weren't near Christmas. And I was like, okay, this is a great opportunity to teach my kids a lesson that I think every American parent at some point teaches them: the value of hard work and earning money. I was like, all right, kids, get in the car. We're heading to the store, and we're going to buy some lemonade and some cookies, and we're going to set up, let's go, a lemonade stand. We've all been there. We've had this rite of passage for our kids. We want to teach them, man, the value of earning money, of working hard, and of, man, understanding kind of how money works. And so we set up a lemonade stand. We went to my parents' neighborhood because they lived sort of near a busier road, a busier intersection. The first lesson of a successful lemonade stand, the same as all business, it's location, location, location. Y'all with me? I know you're thinking about the Chiefs game. We got a little bit of time here. Location, location, location. That is what matters when it comes to lemonade stands. And they had a number in their minds. They knew, okay, how much money I've got to earn at this lemonade stand in order to buy the toy that I want. And I tell you what, man, they set up shop and they started raking it in. I'm sitting there thinking, man, we got to franchise this thing. We got to get your kids and other kids involved, child labor, whatever. We're going to do this. Just kidding, we did not do that. But what struck me is as we began to get closer and closer towards the goal, towards them earning enough money to go and buy the toys that they wanted, I remembered, I was like, oh, this is also a great opportunity to teach my kids about generosity. And so as they kind of closed in on that mark, I said, hey kids, by the way, you got to remember, and right as they kind of made their last sale and earned the money that they were hoping to earn, I'm like, hold on, time out. You got to remember that, hey, we give a portion back to God from all that he has given us today. Now, how do you think that information landed on my kids? Not great. They were furious, right? They were like, what? What are you talking about, my son? He's like 5 years old. He's like, Dad, how do I even give money to God? He's in heaven. Am I supposed to die and hand him like $10? He was like fired up. I was like, no. We give money to God by supporting God's work in the world. We support what he is doing in the world. So we give our first 10%, the first fruits of what we had, back to God by supporting the local church. And I could see like the cogs in my little daughter's brain starting to turn, and she's looking at me real suspicious. And she's like, my dad's the pastor of the church where I'm supposed to give the money. And she goes, Dad, you just want it for yourself. Can't even make it up. And I was like, no, sweetheart, I know some people think that is not how this works or why this works. I said, look, I want your heart to be connected to what God is doing in the world. Jesus said, I will build my church. He's building a church. I'm like, look, I want your heart to be connected to what God is doing in the world. God doesn't need your money. I don't want your money. I want your heart to be connected to Jesus by how you spend your money. And so I was like, let's step back a little bit. Let me help you understand this, kids. So think about this, kids. Who bought the lemonade and the cookies for you today? Well, you and mom did. Exactly, okay? Who kept you safe and stayed here with you the whole time while you were selling lemonade? Well, you and mom did. Exactly. Now, let's step back a few more steps because this is kind of how it works with God. Kids, who made the world? God did. Who made you and me? Who made all of us? God did. Who gave us the sun and the water and the oxygen that we breathe to keep us alive right now? God did. So all of life is a gift from God. All of this belongs to him, right? So when we give money to God's church towards his work in the world, we're just saying, God, all of this belongs to you anyways. I'm just acknowledging that by giving you the first fruits of what you have given to me. Without God, we have nothing. And it's easy to forget that. So when we give to God, it's a reminder to us that all of this belongs to him and is from him. It's like we're saying to God, God, I love you more than this money. I trust you more than this money. I even love you more than a Millennium Falcon Lego set and an American Girl doll. They still weren't happy about it, okay? But they agreed. They said, all right, we're going to trust God. We're going to give him the first fruits. And I wanted them to learn some lessons about, one, the value of working hard, but two, the understanding from a young age that everything we have is a gift from God and that he is our ultimate provider. He is our ultimate provider. And so the first lesson around generosity, around understanding that God is your provider, is this idea of stewardship. You see, generosity is about stewardship, not ownership. It's about stewardship, not ownership. Tim Keller said this. He said, a lack of generosity refuses to acknowledge that your assets are not really yours, but God's. Everything you have belongs to God. It's from God. It's a gift from God. That's how Christians view life and the world that we live in. Stewardship, which is an idea from the Bible, is the active, responsible management of God's resources for God's purposes. We understand that all we have is an opportunity for us to take care of what God has given us and to use it to advance God's purposes in the world. And the Bible teaches this from beginning to end. Here's a few verses to think of it. Psalm 24, verse 1. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. How much of it belongs to God? Everything, all of it. That's what the Bible teaches. Romans 11:36, for from him and through him and to him are all things. How many things? All things. 1 Corinthians 4:7, what do you have that you did not receive? All that we have received from God. And friends, our life is like a mini lemonade stand. God has entrusted to each of us some corner of his creation, some calling on our lives, and we're called to manage the resources that he has given us and to give back the first fruits of what he has given us as a way to attach our hearts to what he's doing, as a way to worship him, and as a way to acknowledge that all of this, my whole life, belongs to you, and without you, God, I would have none of it. It's a reminder, a constant reminder to us that my life is no longer my own, but I belong to Christ, and now my whole life is an act of worship to him. Galatians 2:20 says it like this, my old self has been crucified with Christ. It's dead, it's crucified, it's gone. It's no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. So I live in this earthly body by trusting in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Friends, God is the most generous being ever. The entire nature of the gospel is generosity. Is God giving his son, giving us the gift of salvation and redemption through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. He went first in generosity. We say around here all the time, God is generous, so are we. And he's calling us, he's inviting us to live generous lives with our money, with our time, our talent, our treasure, to be good stewards of all that he's given us, whether it's our relationships or our finances. Now, over the years, as I've taught on this topic of finances, I know it's a touchy subject. I know it's one of those things where everybody comes to the table with different understandings of how this works. And one of the questions that I get a lot is around tithing. This whole idea of giving God our first 10%, supporting the work of the church by honoring God with the first 10%. And the question will come to me, well, Pastor, isn't tithing an Old Covenant, Old Testament law? We're no longer under law, we're under grace. And I'm like, yeah, that's very true. It's a good point. Tithing is interesting though, because the first example that we have of anybody who's following God giving the first 10% to God is from Abraham, when he meets the high priest Melchizedek in the Old Testament in Genesis. Way before the law or the command to tithe was ever given, we have an example of a man who's following God by faith, Abraham, who gives to the high priest Melchizedek, who is an Old Testament representation of Jesus, the first 10% of all that he has. We have no indication that God told him to do that or instructed him to do that. He just did that before there was ever a law about tithing. Then under the command of the law, God said, hey, in order to support my work, the work of the priesthood and the temple and the sacrificial system in the world, the whole nation of Israel is required to give 10% to support this work. And now we move to the New Testament, and friends, you're right, we are no longer under the law. We don't earn anything from God. We don't climb the ladder of the law into heaven. So tithing and generosity is not something we do under obligation, but out of the overflow of grace. It's a response of worship and gratitude to what's been done to us. And friends, grace raises the bar for us as New Testament believers because we have received more through Jesus Christ than the Old Covenant ever did. I thought about this often in the New Testament when Jesus taught on this topic of generosity. He would use examples like the widow's mite in Luke 21. Verse 1-4, he says this, Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the offering box. And he saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. And he said, truly, I tell you, this poor widow put in more than any of them, because it's not about the amount. It's about the posture of the heart. It's about trusting God as your ultimate provider. And it's about dependence on Jesus. She has put in more than all of them, for they all contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, put on everything she had to live on. And so Jesus is celebrating sacrificial generosity. He's celebrating extravagant generosity above and beyond. She didn't give the tithe, she gave 100%, all she had to live on. And it wasn't much, but she gave to God. And he is drawing attention to that, saying, this is the model. This is what it looks like to give out of this overflow of gratitude and generosity toward God. Again, in Matthew 22, the Pharisees came to Jesus and they tried to catch him. They're trying to prove him wrong. They're trying to get Jesus to slip up in one way or the other. And they asked him a question about paying taxes. And they said, Jesus, should we pay taxes to Caesar or not? And what they're trying to catch Jesus in is they're trying to see if Jesus is going to give the Jewish nation permission to support a godless government, a government that was oppressive to God's people. And he's trying to get them, the Pharisees are trying to get Jesus to take sides politically. And Jesus goes, bring me a coin. Whose image is on this coin? And they said, Caesar's. He goes, great. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Give to God what belongs to God. I mean, he just threaded the needle. He didn't answer their question, but he raised the bar. And it's so important to understand what he said there. He drew attention to the image of Caesar on the coin. But the inference that he's making is this: whose image is on your life? Whose image are you made in? You're made in the image of God. So sure, pay your taxes to Caesar, but at the end of the day, your whole life belongs to God. All of you belongs to God. So this reality of grace raises the bar for all of us. And from the very beginning, Jesus decided to build the local church from the very beginning on the sacrificial generosity of everyone. He didn't set up a tax system. He didn't set up a billing system in order to advance the church. He said, I want people to joyfully give because of the grace of God that they've received in the gospel, that they're so excited about it, they want to support the work of what Jesus is doing in the world. From the very beginning, you can think of it like this: the church has always been built on the sacrificial generosity of everyone, not the extraordinary gifts of a few. The sacrificial generosity of everyone, not the extraordinary gifts of the few. Friends, even the seats we're sitting in today, even the story like we just heard of Elijah as he's talking about his encounter with Jesus and now how he's leading others to Christ at the Speedway campus, all of this has been supported by the joyful generosity of people that said, man, I believe in the mission of God at Westside Family Church. We're sitting in the generosity of people that gave 10, 15, 20 years ago. That's how the church works. That's how the mission of God goes forward in the world. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So point number one, generosity is about stewardship, not ownership. Number two, generosity reveals the authenticity of our faith and the allegiance of our hearts. Billy Graham once said, if a person gets his attitude straight towards money, it will help straighten out almost every other area of their life. It's so true. It's such a vital topic in all of our lives. It's such a big issue in all of our lives. It's something we all think about a lot. It's something we stress about. It's something that we work hard for. It's something that we are always cognizant of, because you can't live or make it in this world without some reality of finances. It's a massive issue, and that's why Jesus talked about it more than any other topic in the New Testament, because he knew the number one competitor for Jesus in terms of the throne of our heart was going to be money. So number one competitor, we think of it like a functional savior. When we have enough money, we feel like we're at peace. We look to it as our ultimate source or provider. When money gets low, we freak out, we have anxiety. It becomes the number one competitor to the reality of Jesus as the Lord of our heart. And it's a massive indicator for, man, where is our faith really? What does our heart love most really? It's like the litmus test of our faith. Paul wrote this in 2 Corinthians chapter 9. He's sharing the story of how the Macedonians are giving money towards the church in Jerusalem. He's raising money for the church in Jerusalem. He tells the story of how these amazing believers in Macedonia, they had almost no money. They were under extreme persecution, but they were begging Paul to be able to financially support the church in Jerusalem. Unbelievable. They're saying, Paul, please give us the opportunity to give generously towards what God is doing in Jerusalem. And what Paul says about them in response, he goes, your generosity to them, to the church in Jerusalem, and to all believers will prove. It's going to be evidence that you are obedient to the good news of Christ. So one of the evidences of faith, one of the evidences of the gospel in your life and mine is generosity. God is generous, so are we. God has given us grace as a free gift, so we are called to be generous. Money is one of those things that reveals at the end of the day, God, do I believe that you're my provider? Do I believe that I can entrust my life to you? It's declaring to God that you are my ultimate security, you are my ultimate savior, and you do I trust. And we're declaring to God through generosity, Lord, I love you more than the things that this money can buy for me. Again, turning back the clock a little bit, I remember when my kids were younger, one of the first times I took them to the zoo. And we were at the San Diego Zoo down in Southern California, and we were super excited. We were kind of walking through all the animal exhibits throughout the day, and we were really looking forward to arriving at the lions, the exhibit where you could see the lions. And there was a viewing station up top where you could look out over this big field and see them, but you could also walk underneath, and you were separated from the lions just by a piece of glass. There were hundreds of people underneath because one of the male lions, a massive male lion, was just pacing back and forth inside the glass. And there's like 50 little kids with their face smashed up against the glass looking at this huge lion. It's just going back and forth. And I'm standing back as my kids are squeezing their way to the front to get a close-up look at this thing. And I don't know, we're down there for a minute or two, and suddenly it stops. And I promise you, that thing looks straight at me. And I took a step back. I'm like, I know the glass is there. I know I'm safe, but man, if you've ever had a lion stare into your soul, it's like, okay, I know it's real. I know I'm safe on the other side of this glass, but that thing is huge. It's massive. He looked at me for a few seconds. I looked back at him. My heart's pounding a little bit. Then he started pacing again. And I just thought to myself, because I'm a preacher and I'm always thinking about sermon illustrations, it's just how my life goes. And I thought, man, this reminds me of how I and many of us sort of treat our relationship with Jesus. The Bible calls Jesus a lion of the tribe of Judah. And often what we do with Jesus in some areas of our life is we say, Lord, I enjoy showing up on my clock, on my timetable to kind of enjoy you or look at you when I want to. But I'm going to keep you at an arm's length from my actual life. As long as you're on the other side of the glass, I'm good. I'm good. And I thought about the Chronicles of Narnia, where you have Aslan, who's the lion. He's the Christ figure in the Chronicles of Narnia. And when the kids in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, they find themselves in Narnia for the first time, and they're learning about Aslan, and they're talking to the beavers, and the beavers end up telling them, yeah, he's a lion. And the kids are like, what? He's a lion? Is he safe? And the beavers are like, no, he is not safe, but he's good. He's good. And I thought, man, you know what generosity is like? When you choose to give for the first time, it's like, look, I'm taking the glass down, and Jesus, I'm inviting you into every area of my life. And I promise you this, the reality of God comes screeching into full focus the first time you look at your checkbook or your bank account and you say, Lord, I'm honoring you with this. It brings the reality of your faith. It invites Jesus into the reality of your life in a way that almost nothing else can, especially for us here in America. It takes Jesus out of this comfortable, safe distance away from us, and it brings him into full focus, and it really puts us sort of on the litmus test of our own faith. Lord, do I believe you're my provider? Do I believe you're the source of everything I have? Do I believe that my lemonade stand is just a gift from you? Do I really love you more than all the things that you've given me? Am I really being obedient to you? Friends, this is a discipleship issue. It's a following Jesus issue. And I've said this at all the different churches I've pastored because I believe because I've experienced the provision of God. Tithing is something that we have believed in and practiced our whole lives. And I want you to experience God as your provider. I want you to know him as your ultimate source in all of life. And I've said this at every church I've pastored. I've said, look, if for whatever reason you feel like you cannot give toward the mission of Jesus in and through Westside Family Church, I want you to find a church where you can. Find a church where you say, man, I'm so fired up about what God is doing in and through this place. I want to give here. That's how important it is for your heart to be connected to what Jesus is doing through the local church. I really believe that. And I believe it is a catalyst for you to grow in your faith and understanding that, man, God is my provider. He's my source. He will never leave me or forsake me, no matter what is happening in my natural life. Something about generosity unlocks the provision of God over your life. I don't even know how it works. Kingdom math doesn't make sense. I just know throughout my life, as I have stepped first and trusted God and given first towards what he wants me to give toward and honored him first in my finances, he has showed up and provided in ways that don't even make sense. And every single time I've been like, wow, God, you see me. You care. You know, you're right here with me. You will never leave me or forsake me. Every single time it has produced worship, faith, trust in my heart, and love for Jesus. We live in a culture where we are dealing with, I'm going to move through these, what's called a secular worldview. Our culture is telling us every single day, whether we realize it or not, hey, this life is all you have. Live for the moment, live for now, live for the enjoyment today, right? The secular worldview says, look, you came from nothing, you live your life, and you return to nothing. So you better live it up right here and now because this is all you have. Friends, that's not the worldview of the Bible or of Christians. What Christians believe is the opposite. I came from God. My life is an act of worship for God. My decisions today impact eternity. That's why Jesus said, don't store up for yourselves treasures here on earth. Store up treasures in heaven by the way that you live your life, give your money, serve the poor, serve others, love others, invite people into this new life of the kingdom. Live in such a way that makes sense for eternity, not just for your 5, 10, or 15-year plan. Friends, do you have an eternal investment strategy? Do you have a strategy that says, man, how I'm using my money today is going to impact the eternity of other people tomorrow? By giving toward the mission of a local church, you're impacting lives like Elijah's, who we heard about today. You're impacting the thousands of lives who are receiving care through the care center that is happening. You're impacting the hundreds of people who've taken a step of faith and gotten baptized this year. You are putting your money on mission to support the work of God's kingdom. And too many of us, and I've had seasons like this, we live like functional atheists when it comes to our money. We're like, Lord, you can be Lord of this area, but I just can't trust you with this. And I understand it's hard. I don't know what your history or your story is around this whole topic, but I do know that God is a good Father. He so clothes the grass of the field and the birds of the air. How much more valuable are you to him? And when we begin to know him as our provider, our faith grows, our love for him grows, our trust in him grows. The last thing I want to say, point number 3, I'm going to get through these. Generosity is a doorway to God's supernatural provision in our lives. Coming back to the lemonade story and just sort of finishing this up. My kids were not happy about tithing, about giving the first fruits back to God. And once they sort of made that decision, they're like, all right, we got to hang out a little bit longer to try and earn the money that we need. And it was so providential and just kind of the Lord that it worked out this way, because the very next car around the corner was my parents. It was TM Paca. And it was hilarious because my kids were like, Grandma, Granddad, come buy some lemonade and cookies. And they did what every grandparent would do in that moment. They got a cup of lemonade, a cookie, and they handed over a $20 bill. And what was hilarious is that my kids didn't say thank you to TM Paca. They were like, praise God. The Lord provides, I was like, my parents are like, what is going on here, And I was like, that's the right response, kids. They're like, yeah, TM Paca gave you the money, but God is your provider. And you got to experience this in a little way, and sure, it's about, some toys that you wanted, right? And I get it, man, there is way bigger issues in the world, but man, God cares about the details. He will never leave you or forsake you, and there is something about us being generous that opens the doorway to God's provision in our lives, and some of us are living in lack. Some of us are living paycheck to paycheck, and we're thinking, I just can't afford to give, and I want to say, you can't afford not to. Because when you choose to step into this, you unleash God's supernatural provision in your life in ways that don't add up. They don't even make sense. Luke 6:38 says, give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. And friends, this is not a prosperity gospel. I'm not saying God is like an ATM in the sky. You're like, all right, Lord, I'm giving you this much. I need this much back. What I am saying is there's a kingdom principle here of generosity. God will supply your needs, and God will give even above and beyond your needs as you choose to support his work in the world and live generously. Somehow it opens up a generosity from heaven in our lives so that we, not just so we can live rich, comfortable lives, so that we continue to support his work in the world and live generous lives towards others. This is how the kingdom principle works around generosity. 90% with God's blessing will always go further than 100% without it, every single time. And so the call to action today is around these cards in your seat on the harvest offering. We're gonna have a moment of response, and I just wanna encourage you, and maybe this is a scary or a hard moment for you. We're not asking you to fill out any information. This is just between you and God, between you and the Lord. It's a commitment between you and God saying, Lord, maybe you've never given towards the work of God in the world, and you're saying, Lord, I'm gonna step in for the first time. I'm committing to step in for the first time. Monthly, whatever that may be, because I want to know you as my provider. I want to honor you with what you've given me. I want to live like everything I have is from you, like your Bible teaches, like your word teaches. Maybe for some of you, it's time to step up, to say, Lord, I've been shorting you a little bit. I've not been living like all I have is a gift from you. I want to know you as my provider. I'm stepping up to give regularly at that 10%. And for some of you, God might be calling you to step out of the boat and to give extravagantly and almost hilariously towards the work of God in the world. He puts that on people's hearts to support the work of the church. And so I want to take a moment where you're going to fill this out. And then we're going to pray for you, pray for each of us in this room, no matter where you might be in your journey financially, that God would reveal himself to you as your provider. But I want you to take a step of faith today and fill this out wherever you're at, even if it's just a prayer. Like, I can't commit to this today, Lord, but help me to begin to live in faith. You can write that down and sign your name. And I want you to come forward as just an act of putting action behind your faith. Put it in these mailboxes like you're mailing a postcard to your future self, and you're going to say, watch how God shows up. If you want to give resources today of your finances, you can put that in here. It will go with our normal tithes and offerings as well. I shared last week that, this church has been so generous. Through the Unshakable series, we had set a goal to go above and beyond our normal giving by $2 million a year to pay that care center off within a few years. And right now, we're at about $1 million over our normal budget, which is amazing, but we're believing for $2 million over so that we can pay that thing off as quick as possible. And so if you want to help us close that gap, all of these help us reach that goal and get there quicker. And so friends, let's take a moment. We're going to end with a song, but take a moment between you and the Lord and say, Lord, this is about me and you. And then if you need a pen, we have some deacons around who have some pens. And then step forward out of your seats, put this into the mailbox. Step into that commitment this year, and let's see how God shows up.